Am I good in the back? Thanks, Ben. All right, hashtag Girlboss or hashtag Tradwife, seeking authentic womanhood in a culture of cartoons. Last Saturday, I dragged my very sweet husband to the shopping mall where I informed him that we would be going into every single store in military fashion to find something for me to wear because I had nothing to wear for this summit, and what was stressing me out was that I had nothing to wear for this summit. And so I uttered the wish of probably every woman on the planet, and I was like, I just need to find something that doesn't make me look fat. And he says, what are you speaking on again? And I was like, authentic womanhood in a culture of cartoons. And bless his heart, he said, don't take this the wrong way, but do you feel like maybe this is against the spirit of what you're trying to do? I am here as a living witness that we are all struggling in this culture of cartoons, which is why I share that very humbling story. None of us, I think, is exempt from this culture, even if we have spent decades reading about the church's vision of woman, right? Like, it's hard to live. Cartoons, what do I mean by that? Cartoons are 2D, right? A cartoon is a flat picture of a person, usually with exaggerated characteristics. So everybody knows Disney princesses, like their eyes are the size of their face, right? These really big eyes. Or Barbie's waistline, like that is just, she's not actually gonna stand up straight, right? These are exaggerated characteristics that show up in cartoons. And I think many of our visions of womanhood today, and manhood, but that is a different talk. Apologies, men. I think many visions of womanhood today in our culture, fueled by social media, I think are cartoonish. And I think that's a problem. We label people, we label ourselves often with things like hashtags, and those hashtags lessen the richness of the human person. So what are the exaggerated characteristics of hashtag Girlboss? She leans in, she hustles, she's making power moves and dressing to impress, right? This is the hashtag Girlboss. What are the exaggerated characteristics of the hashtag Tradwife? She wears these lovely long prairie skirt dresses, and all her children happily chase chickens in the yard while she bakes sourdough that always comes out perfectly, right? I'm using the word hashtag a lot actually because I'm trying to emphasize that these are cartoon versions of real women. And everybody's fighting about it, but like there aren't actually real women who are only those things, right? We as a culture tend to hold up cartoons as role models, but they're not real people, right? These are just snippets. They're just little aspects, flattened aspects of someone's life. Hashtag Girlboss or hashtag Tradwife doesn't and cannot capture the reality of who a particular woman is. Now, I want to be clear here. There's nothing wrong with building your own business. I am trying to do that. There's nothing wrong with wearing prairie dresses. The whole point I'm trying to make is that the problem comes when we flatten a vision of real women into something that is one-dimensional or two-dimensional. That's when the problem comes in. It happens on social media, it happens in our cultural conversations and our movies and TV and even popular novels. It also happens in philosophical conversations. So if we are asking that question, what is a woman, right? What makes a woman? And we end up with the conclusion that a woman is a female human person, that's true, right? That's true. And it's important to have definitional lines. And traditional philosophy is designed to help us understand things like that tree is not a bunny rabbit. They are different, right? A woman is not a man. They are different. The purpose of a philosophical definition is to narrow down what makes one thing different than another thing. This is a basic and necessary thing, but it is basic, which means it's the base. Right? It's the minimum. It is not the fullness or the richness, and it's not designed to be. Pope John Paul II was fond of referring to the human person as a mystery. Now, when we use the word mystery, sometimes we think of a whodunit. I love a good murder mystery. It's a problem, right? Was it Colonel Mustard in the billiard room with the rope, right? Was it Miss Scarlet with the piano, right? But when we use the word mystery in a faith context, like the mysteries of the rosary, we're talking about something that deserves our contemplation. I always use this example. Think of it like the difference between a maze and a museum. Why do you go into a maze? You go into a maze to get out, right? Why do you go into a museum? You go into a museum to contemplate the beauty that is there. Or if you're like some spouses, to read every explanatory plaque next to every piece of art, but we're gonna leave that aside for now. Okay, so the human person is a mystery, not a problem to be solved, and not a cartoon. But our culture seems to have forgotten this about the human person. Mother in her talk this morning used the phrase, we're living in a culture of amnesia, right? Pope Benedict has a quote that I love and I use in like every talk that I give. It's really beautiful. He says, the church has the memory of what it means to be human in the face of a civilization of forgetfulness. The church has the memory of what it means to be human in the face of a civilization of forgetfulness. So the best place to explore the mystery of the human person, the mystery of authentic womanhood, the mystery of being you, it's from within the church, not from a culture of cartoons. So what I want to do in the rest of this talk is to begin to explore that mystery of authentic womanhood, that positive vision of what it means to be a woman from within the tradition. Now, there is so much to be explored as we've tasted just in the summit today. I'm just going to highlight again some key points, and then at the end of this talk, I want to invite us all to discern how we, as individual women, apologies men, are called to live out that womanhood. And if you want to talk more about the hashtags, that's what the panel's for. Okay, so if we're going to talk about what authentic womanhood is, we have to start again at that base. A woman, just like a man, is a human person. She is made in the image and likeness of God. She is a body-soul unity. She is rational, she has intellect, she has free will. These are the basics, and I've just gone through them really quickly. We could spend years unpacking each one of those, right? These are the basics. But a woman is a human person who is female. She's a female human person. And we know one thing about that is that her sex enables her to procreate in a way that is complementary to males. All right, so that's quite a basic definition. Human person, female human person. Let's remember this is basic. It gives us the foundations. Women are not men, men are not women. We're not just making this up as we go along, right? But I want to build on that foundation and talk about the richness of authentic womanhood. I have some good news and I have some bad news. The good news is that there is no single particular way to be an authentic woman. All right, this is very freeing. The bad news is there is no one singular particular way to be an authentic woman, which can be frustrating, right? We kind of like a checklist. There are outside limits that I can't cross, right? I cannot be an authentic woman and a fish, right? Or a tree or a man, right? There are outside limits, but within those limits, the basic limits, we are called to discern what authentic womanhood looks like in our particular lives. Now, this can be frustrating because it's easier when someone just tells us what to do, right? Like we spent our whole childhood being like, don't tell me what to do. And then you reach 30 and you're like, would someone please just tell me what to do, right? And what's more, the human person tends towards being imitative or mimetic. We tend to see other people and try to be like them, right? This shows up a lot in adolescence, particularly with girls. We've all seen Mean Girls or been Mean Girls or experienced Mean Girls, right? We have this tendency to try to imitate one another. And I think that's actually why we are drawn to cartoons, because they are strong images, right? I know what I'm looking for. I know I want my eyes to look like half the size of my face, and I'm gonna put all the makeup on to do that, right? It gives me something clear to aim for. And also I can feel less alone if I get together with other people who have certain exaggerated characteristics, and we kind of form a tribe. Now, this kind of cartoonish ideal, I think this also can affect how men view women. and vice versa. Again, different talk. Because what happens is when we encounter an ideal of some kind in our culture that might come through hypersexualized pornography, a lot of men, if they've done studies on this, have learned how to have sexual encounters via pornography, right? This is what to expect from women. In the ancient days, there might have been something like Botticelli's Venus. This is what a woman's body is designed to look like. Or the Instagram Tradwife, or the Hollywood Girlboss, right? Who gets a whole movie about herself. Then what happens is we receive these cartoons or these ideals, however we phrase it. We begin to assume that real women are like that or should be like that, right? Anybody else grow up with Barbie and be really disappointed that you did not end up with her proportions, right? Right? This is what happens. We begin to expect these things from real women rather than just encountering a person, a real woman, and letting that person be the revelation of God that they are, uniquely made in his image and likeness. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with having good ideals. There's nothing wrong with imitating the goodness we see in others. The ideal woman is the virtuous woman. The ideal man is the virtuous man. And the virtuous person is someone to be imitated. But people are mysteries, not flat philosophical definitions or exaggerated cartoons, which would be easier, right? It's easier to work with either of those. But people are mysteries. And virtue is manifested or lived out in a variety of ways. As many people are in this room, on this earth, right? They are going to live virtue differently. Authentic womanhood is shown to us in real women who are living really virtuous lives. It's why we're all attracted to the sisters, right? Even if we don't want to be one, we're all sitting here being like, wow, these women are amazing, right? We might not feel called to be like them in one sense, right? In terms of donning a habit, or they're from America. I imagine many of the Brits are happy being British, right? There's, not personality-wise, but there's something in them that is deeply attractive, and that is those women are truly authentic women living virtue, and it is attractive. Okay, so both men and women are called to a life of virtue, right? This can be hard to begin to parse out exactly where the difference comes in, because it's not like, oh, men are called to be courageous. Well, are women called to be cowardly? No, right? We're all called to the virtue of courage, but how that is lived out is going to be very different depending on the person. So where does this leave us? Can we not say anything? We're just all called to be virtuous. Good luck. Good talk. I don't think so. I think we can say some things, but I think we can say them carefully and acknowledge that we're working with mystery here and not scientific formula. I think we need to take a slightly more poetic approach. Mother Agnes used the phrase maternal hue in her talk this morning. Did you guys catch that? There's a maternal hue to feminine love. That's the phrase she used. That's a poetic phrase, right? That's not a scientific definition, and that's on purpose. All right? So we're going to talk about this mystery, but we're going to do it carefully. What do we know about women? They're fully human persons, the female kind of fully human persons. Their femaleness is biological. It is in the body, but I'm not just a body, and I didn't just get sort of like poured into a body, right? I'm a body-soul unity. So being female affects me as a person. I'm a female person, not just a person with a female body, right? I'm a whole, I'm a unity. We know that in cooperating with God and bringing about new life, both men and women are necessary, but it is the woman's body that welcomes, nourishes, and protects that new little person in his or her beginnings when they're most vulnerable. In the order of creation, human life begins in the body of a woman, and the incarnation happens in the body of a woman. God becomes man in a womb. Show me another religion that's like that amazing, right? I mean, this vision is incredible. God becomes man in the body of a woman. Reflecting on this vision of woman, John Paul II says this: in God's eternal plan, woman is the one in whom the order of love in the created world of persons
takes first root. He says, the moral and spiritual strength of a woman is joined to her awareness that God entrusts the human being to her in a special way. Of course, God entrusts every human being to each and every human being. But this entrusting concerns women in a special way, precisely by reason of their femininity, and this in a particular way determines their vocation. He is dancing with mystery here. You notice that, right? Women are particularly entrusted. Of course, everybody's entrusted, but women are particularly entrusted. Again, I remember reading this. Someone handed me Mulieris Dignitatem when I was 17, so I've been at this a long time. And I remember years of wrestling with this text because it's like, why doesn't he just say what he means, right? Why doesn't he just explain what that means? If everybody's entrusted to everybody, what does it mean that they're entrusted to me in a particular way as a woman, right? We read it and you're sort of like, oh, I want like a scientific definition where I can just check it off. But we're dancing with mystery here, right? And sometimes when we want a really clear, strict definitional answer, we might have a temptation to interpret his words in one of two ways. We might say, okay, fine. The special way, it's biological. That's really clear. Special way, the human being is entrusted to another human being, is physically in the womb of a woman. Just biological, and therefore the vocation of every woman is to become pregnant. Or we might say, as I was tempted to do for many years in my youth, this is so vague, I cannot make any meaningful statement out of this, right? This is so vague. But neither of those interpretations is true. John Paul II, and we've heard a lot about this from the sisters this morning, which I am really delighted to see, because part of today, our hope was that you would see spiritual motherhood embodied in so many different walks of life, right? So I'm going to talk about it now. The sisters talked about it earlier. Sally Reed's going to be on the panel. She can talk about it in her way. Okay, motherhood is first and foremost spiritual. Motherhood is first and foremost spiritual. We experience motherhood first and foremost biologically, right? Because we're born of women and we see women having babies. And when we talk about motherhood in common contexts, we mean women getting pregnant and having babies. But John Paul II's point is no. First, it's a spiritual reality. Motherhood first is spiritual. And it is the call or vocation of every woman, regardless of whether or not she bears children in her own body. Each woman is called to spiritual motherhood. It is not limited to those who are nuns. It is not offered as a consolation prize for those who cannot have biological children. Spiritual motherhood is the primary way that a woman lives her motherhood, her womanhood. Metaphysically, a woman is a place of welcome for others, whether or not she physically does or even can do so. I have been part of many infertility groups, and there was a woman in one, and she didn't have a womb. She was born without a womb, which is obviously a massive cross for her. And she said, I would always go to these Catholic talks where they talk about, you're the type of person that can bear children in your body, and that's what makes you a woman. And she said, I would always walk away feeling really left out and broken and like I wasn't a real woman, right? And anyone in this room who's experienced this sort of thing will know, right? This is a huge cross. Motherhood is primarily spiritual and secondarily biological. It is not dependent on your ability to conceive biologically. It is first and foremost spiritual. Even if a woman has babies, we've got some lovely babies with us today, including 2 of my godchildren, which I'm very proud of. Their mothers are first spiritual mothers and then biological mothers, okay? That's the order of things. So here's what we know so far about authentic womanhood, what a 3D vision of woman looks like as opposed to a cartoon. A woman is fully human. She's a female human. A woman is called to be virtuous. A woman is a place of welcome for others. A woman is called to spiritual motherhood. What does this actually mean? it means you've got to discern all these things for your life. You have to actively engage with the reality of being a woman, which in our culture is a little bit weird. Like, unless you're going to go full on girl boss or full on tradwife, right? It feels weird to think about engaging with the fact that I'm a woman. You just kind of like get on with your day, right? But these are things we're actually called to wrestle with. So in the last part of this talk, I would like to propose a kind of Venn diagram. I do not have a PowerPoint today, so you're going to have to rely on me drawing circles in the air and remembering what I put in them. I'm going to propose a kind of Venn diagram where the intersection of these things show us authentic womanhood. Okay, I'll name them and then I'll go through them. First, in this first circle over here, is our particulars, and I'm using that as a noun, not an adjective. Our particulars: unique personality, circumstances, state in life, spirituality, gifts, all these things that make us unique as an individual are particulars. Second circle over here, human virtue lived in those particulars. Third circle down here, spiritual motherhood as a manifestation of those virtues lived in your particulars. And you know, when you go to the eye doctor, I went recently and have been inducted into the world of reading glasses. That was fun. You know, they put that thing on you and they click the things. They click the little like lenses, and eventually you get something that's clear. My hope is with this Venn diagram that as we all pursue holiness, these things begin to all click together so that when you're looking through, you see authentic womanhood. All right, so let's talk about the particulars over here. My proposal is that an authentic woman, someone who's living authentic womanhood, knows her particulars, and for the most part, she's made peace with them. Okay? Incidentally, young women in the room, this takes a really long time, right? Like, don't expect to have this finished by the time you're 20, right? It takes time to get to know yourself, right? And also even maybe longer to come to peace with yourself. So this authentic woman, she knows kind of really basic things like, am I an introvert or an extrovert? Is spending time with people going to drain me or give me energy, right? And she's going to act accordingly and not, if she's an introvert, compare herself to her extrovert friends or vice versa, right? She's going to make peace with kind of these basic things about herself. She's also going to know the particulars of her spiritual life. She's going to have a lively prayer life according to the spirituality with which God draws her and according to her state in life, right? The mums of little ones in the rooms and the sisters, I guarantee you, are not praying in the same way every day, and that is by design, right? Someone who is drawn to Ignatian meditation is going to pray very differently than someone who has a Carmelite spirituality. That's by design, right? These differences are beautiful differences in the church. Authentic women are not then comparing themselves to one another, right? We can learn from one another, but there isn't that comparison of like, she says 3 rosaries every day and like, I just can't focus. Like, I guess I should pray 3 rosaries. Like maybe you should read some scripture and like see how that goes, right? Try a different form. An authentic woman in her particulars also knows her gifts and talents and her weaknesses, right? C.S. Lewis has this great line about humility where it's not thinking so little of yourself or so much of yourself, but just being able to look at something beautiful, like a beautifully designed cathedral that you designed, and just saying, yeah, it's good. Like, great. Now I can walk away, right? Because we acknowledge that that's God's work in us that we've cooperated with. So the authentic woman knows her gifts and talents, her weaknesses. She's working on her weaknesses, but also trusting that God can write straight with crooked lines because she's called to be faithful, not perfect. Right? A lot of us struggle with perfectionism, and I think that gets in the way of being an authentic woman. So again, the authentic woman, for the most part, has made peace within herself and her particulars and is not relying on the cartoons to tell her how to be in the world. All right, that's that first circle. Second circle of virtue. An authentic woman is practicing virtue within the context of her particulars, in her state in life, in her circumstances, to the people around her in her real life and not strangers on the internet. Now, I know this is being filmed. Welcome, strangers on the internet. But, right, primarily life is about the people in front of us. And I want to give you an example of this because I know this can still sound esoteric. I want to give you a really clear example of this. Let's say that you have a very, very shy woman. And this shy woman loves Jesus and she wants to practice the virtue of kindness and live spiritual motherhood. But the idea of being one of these volunteers on the hospitality committee just makes her tremble, right? She's like, that is not for me. And one night she's at a church event, maybe here at St. Pat's, and she sees someone new come in, and the hospitality committee is so busy greeting everyone else that no one greets this person, and they're looking very lost. And in her heart, she feels the movement of the Holy Spirit saying, just go over and say hello. Like, just go over and say hello. And she feels this nudge, and she takes a deep breath, and she prays for courage, and she does it. She walks over, and she says hello. This is the virtue of courage for that particular woman, lived out in her particular circumstances. That same action is probably not an act of courage for the hospitality committee extrovert who's like, everybody's a friend. I can't wait to meet all the strangers. They're just real friends, right? But for this shy woman, this is an act of virtue. This is an act of courage. There's a real person in front of her. There's a real spiritual call in her soul. And this 3D authentic woman is not going to get a hashtag about it. Nobody might see it. Jesus sees it, right? That person that she welcomes sees it. And that's all that matters, right? She is listening to the call of the Lord and she's acting on it, even though she's afraid, right? Okay, so that is virtue. That's our second circle. We're going to go down to our third circle now, which is spiritual motherhood, which we've been hearing a lot about today. That was on purpose, right? Because this is really key. An authentic woman is living spiritual motherhood as a manifestation of virtue in her particulars. That shy woman in the example I gave you, that was spiritual motherhood for her, right? She saw someone in need and she was drawn to serve them. And she did it. She was living spiritual motherhood. There are myriad of ways to live spiritual motherhood, and I'm really grateful that Mother in her talk this morning gave us some of the characteristics of spiritual motherhood. Last year, one of the little babies here, I became the godmother too, and at that baptism, the priest gave this really great talk, and he said, I was standing there with my husband, and he was talking about us becoming godparents, and he said, you know, as godmother, you represent Mother Church in the life of this child. You're called to do what Mother Church does for us, lovingly explain the truth, comfort, offer healing balm, sometimes even discipline when necessary, right, as Mother Church does. This is what we're called to do in spiritual motherhood to the person in front of us. And I want to pause for a minute here because I am sure there are women in this room, because I was that woman in the room many decades ago now, who are feeling not very motherly, right? Who are feeling like, I just don't feel like the welcoming mother. I don't feel like the one who's like going to nourish and, you know, speak the truth and offer healing balm. It's not my personality, right? Okay, number one, you don't have to feel it. That's okay. But two, I want to challenge you to be aware of what cartoons might be taking the place of authentic motherhood in your head, right? Maybe in your head, being a spiritual mother means being someone who only ever talks in the softest of voices. Oh, that is not me, right? Or maybe in your head, motherhood is sort of like, okay, I always remember all my friends' birthdays and send all the cards and bake exactly we have kind of this, sometimes we get these false ideas, again, these cartoons, and they get in the way of us having a good relationship with our own spiritual motherhood for others. Listen, ladies, spiritual motherhood for you might look like helping somebody make a spreadsheet, okay? That is not what we necessarily the first thing we think of with like nourishing life, right? But you know what? I'm terrible at making spreadsheets. I would be delighted if someone wanted to spiritually mother me in that way, right? If you're feeling panicked and you don't know what to do with this computer and the formulas are all broken, right? Spiritual motherhood for you might be helping someone make a spreadsheet or coach a soccer, football team, right? Who knows? It can take a whole variety of ways, but you've got to know yourself and your own gifts and talents, right, that you bring, so you can use those to serve others. I want to end trying to get our Venn diagram circles to come all close together personally so that we can all start living authentic womanhood. So I want to end with a couple questions for you to take away to prayer and discernment on a personal level, and maybe chat with someone that you trust, someone who's a spiritual mother figure to you, or spiritual father figure to you, a good friend. Okay, the first question about the first circle of the particulars. Do I actually know myself? Have I made peace with myself? What is mine to embrace and what is mine to change? Right? I love that serenity prayer. Does everyone know the serenity prayer? Lord, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? When we know ourselves, we've got to know that wisdom. For the second circle, do I pursue virtue according to my particulars, or am I too busy looking at other people and feeling bad about myself in comparison? How much time do I spend with cartoons? Scrolling the Instagram. If you're older, paging through magazines. Do people still do that, right? Watching Hollywood. I mean, whatever it is, right? Am I just too busy looking at cartoons to pay attention to how to live virtue in my real life right now, to know myself and to act accordingly? And finally, do I practice the spiritual motherhood that we've been talking about all day? Am I attentive to others? Do I try to love them well? Am I afraid of the whole spiritual motherhood thing? Because I've got a lot of mother wounds. There are a lot of us in the room with mother wounds, right? Like this is very common in our culture. What healing do I need to enter into so that I can love others well and be a spiritual mother to them? So the next time you are hashtagging or scrolling through your hashtags and you are tempted to compare yourself to a cartoon or some false idea, remember what Mother Agnes was talking about this morning. Authentic womanhood is always going to come first from rooting ourselves in the love of God, right? In order to give that love to others, we have to receive it from the Father first. So I would encourage you today, maybe not in this moment, maybe in this moment, go to adoration, spend some time with the Lord. If you are looking to be an authentic woman, you're going to be much better off Instagram and in adoration, right? So spend your time there and also get to know other authentic women. We are so delighted that there are so many of you here, right? Get to know each other. You're all here because you're seeking something similar. So get to know one another, get to know women who are outside your demographic, your age. We hope that we can all learn from each other and live our spiritual motherhood well together. I'll stop there.